All right, let's dive into something pretty intense today. We're going to deconstruct Operation Epic Fury, a hypothetical but incredibly detailed scenario for a joint U.S.-Israeli military operation targeting the very heart of Iran's leadership. We're going to pull apart the strategy, look at the goals, and explore the potential fallout of what could be an enormous gamble.
And if you want a hint of the tone here, just look at this quote. It's a statement that basically says, "You think this is it? We're just getting started." It sets this really ominous stage that whatever we've seen so far, it's just the opening act.
So, here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll nail down what exactly Operation Epic Fury is supposed to be. Then we'll get into that first major move, the decapitation strike. After that, we'll explore the really complicated idea of regime change, what could happen to Iran in the future, and finally, what it would look like if this turns into a long, drawn-out war.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. At its core, what are we actually talking about with Operation Epic Fury? Well, in military terms, this is what you'd call a decapitation strike. It's not just about hitting targets, it's about cutting the head off the snake. It really has two main goals. One, take out the entire senior leadership of Iran, and two, make sure they can't effectively hit back. And according to this scenario, it kicked off with a huge success, a surprise attack in broad daylight. I mean, the sheer audacity of it. And it apparently managed to take out not just the supreme leader himself, but a whole slew of his top commanders in one fell swoop.
But of course, a strike like this is never just one and done. It's the opening move in a very complex game of chess, full of advantages, weaknesses, and a ton of potential countermoves.
So the US and Israeli forces have some major cards to play. Surprise was obviously huge, but behind that is just raw, overwhelming military power, incredible surveillance tech, and maybe the most important piece of all, really, really good intelligence on what's happening inside Iran. But Iran's been getting ready for a day like this for a long, long time. Their defense strategy isn't about one central fortress. It's a web of hidden underground missile bases spread all over the country. They're built specifically to take a massive first punch and still be able to fire back. So how do you deal with a defense like that? Well, the next move would be to bring in the heavy hitters. We're talking B-1 and B-2 stealth bombers. Their mission would be to hunt down and crack open those buried bases, taking away Iran's main threat, its ability to launch long-range attacks.
Now, this is where it gets really complicated, and frankly, controversial. Because this whole thing isn't just about military targets. The ultimate goal is to fundamentally change the country itself.
And what's super interesting is that, even with reports of some people celebrating the Supreme Leader's death, the message from the White House was basically, stay inside. That tells you a lot. They're not trying to spark some immediate chaotic uprising because they figure that would just be a bloodbath.
Instead, the plan is much more methodical. It's a multi-step process. First, you take away their military fangs. Then you go after the security forces they use to control their own people. After that, you shatter their command and control to sow confusion. And it's only then, once the regime is crippled and can't easily crush a protest, that the playing field is considered level for the people to rise up.
And here's the end game. It's what's described as a synthesis of air power from the outside and street power from the inside. The idea is to put Iran's security forces in a vice, squeezing them from both sides until they're forced to either switch sides or just give up. But this all leads to a massive, massive question. If this actually works, if the regime collapses, what comes next? You create a power vacuum, and that can be incredibly dangerous and unpredictable.
So that's the multi-trillion-dollar question, isn't it? What would a post-conflict Iran even look like? The possibilities range from something similar to what they have now, all the way to a total collapse.
Analysts have pretty much mapped out four big potential futures. You could get an Islamic Republic 2.0, same system, different face. Or the military could just take over completely. The worst case, a failed state, just total chaos. And then there's the outcome everyone hopes for, a transition to a popular, representative government.
And this analysis actually points to one specific path as being the most workable. There's a transition plan from the exiled crown prince that's seen as a way to, as they say, square the circle, meaning it could potentially satisfy both the Iranian people's desire for change and the West's security concerns.
But to get to any of those futures, you have to get through the war itself, and there's no guarantee it'll be a short one. So that brings us to our final point, the very real possibility of a long, grinding war of attrition.
Now, President Trump publicly suggested a timeline of about 4 to 5 weeks for the main part of the operation, but he was also clear that they could keep it going for much, much longer if they had to.
And this reveals that Iran has a long war strategy of its own, and it's pretty clever. They seem to be saving their best weapons. Against the Gulf states, they're using a ton of cheaper drones, like an 8-to-1 ratio, just to overwhelm defenses. But against a heavily armed target like Israel, they're using their heavy-hitting ballistic missiles, trying to exhaust and break through those advanced defense systems.
That public timeline, though, has gotten some criticism. This expert take points out that giving your enemy a schedule to plan around might be a huge mistake. It takes away the element of uncertainty, which is something that has often been seen as a key part of President Trump's strategy.
So that's what it all comes down to. This one final, huge question. Is this a fast, decisive move that's about to redraw the map of the Middle East? Or is this just the opening salvo in a long, bloody, and totally unpredictable conflict? Right now, nobody knows for sure.